Yes, as you've introduced me, I'm Nele, a PhD student at TU Delft. And in this specific talk, I will present to you our findings about how smokers want to quit with a virtual coach. So, oh, I actually cannot. There we go. So we are developing an app that helps people quit smoking. And this app also has a virtual coach that guides people through the quitting process. And when you design such an app, there are many choices that you have to make. For example, there are different elements that help people change their behavior, such as talking to themselves, setting goals, or creating plans for when it doesn't go well. So we have to decide which ones of these elements we want to include. We also have to decide how often we want to have these elements, how long they should last, and whether users decide when to do things or if it's about the system proposing things. And things get even more complicated when we want to include other parties in the app, such as a general practitioner, people's social environment, or the virtual coach that we want to develop. So we need to make all of these choices, and we want to do that in a way that people use and continue to use the application. And currently, these kinds of behavior change applications have very low rates of adherence, so people commonly stop using the applications, which suggests that we need a better understanding of what people actually want from such an application when they use it. When you want to get input from users, there are several factors you have to account for. First is that it's not just about the technology that you're developing, but when you ask users, you also have to consider the environment that they're in and their specific characteristics. Moreover, you need to consider how long people have used the system before you've asked them about their opinions. If people have just started to use the system, then you're likely to get an overly positive view of your system because of the novelty effect, according to which people tend to be initially very excited about a system until they over time become aware of the limitations, and then this excitement drops. And if you wait very long, then again, you're likely to get an overly positive view of your system because according to the law of attrition, people for whom the system does not work tend to drop out. So then after some time, you're only left with the people for whom the system works. And then you don't find out what to improve for the other people. And lastly, it is important to consider how mature your system is. If you have a very simple system, then it's easy to test multiple design ideas. But for users to really be able to identify barriers and benefits to using a system, the system needs to be quite mature. So in our study, we tried to account for these different elements. And what we've done is that we had a pre-questionnaire and a pre-screening where we collected user characteristics. So we know who our participants are. And then we had multiple sessions in which people interacted with a text-based virtual coach. And this virtual coach assigned people preparatory activities for quitting smoking, such as thinking about their desired future self or tracking their smoking behavior. And then in the next session, the virtual coach would ask people about their experience with these activities. And after these 5 sessions, which were spread over about 2 weeks, people filled in a post-questionnaire where they again described their experience with their last activity, their barriers and motivators for doing the activities. And to get input on multiple design ideas, people also described their views on videos of interaction scenarios for virtual coach. So we had some videos where we described how the virtual coach could look in the future. And we also looked at literature of related studies and what they found. And overall, we had 671 participants and more than 5,000 responses. And in our analysis, we then triangulated these qualitative findings from these 5,000 responses, quantitative findings such as people's characteristics, and findings from the literature. So we had a diverse set of data, and we triangulated that in this mixed methods analysis. Yeah, the results were 14 themes that describe users' needs for such a smoking cessation application. And these themes relate to behaviors that are performed, such as reflecting on the last week with the virtual coach, the user who performs a behavior, other parties that may be included in the behavior, such as when the virtual coach recommends people to reach out to their general practitioner for additional support, and the environment in which the behavior is performed, such as the time that people have available. And now I don't have time to look at each of these 14 themes in detail, so I will look at one main theme for each of these 4 levels. First, the behavior level. One important theme here was that people were thinking about how useful a behavior was, and specifically whether it would help them, give them advice or tips, or whether they would learn something by engaging in a behavior. For example, people were interested in whether behavior would help them reflect on their progress, for example, whether it would help them reach their goals, whether it would help them to deal with cravings, so whether they would learn how to deal with cravings to smoke, or whether it was just helpful in general. For example, one person was asked whether they would reach out to their general practitioner in case of a smoking relapse if their virtual coach recommends them to do so. And they said that they wouldn't do that because they don't think their GP could do anything to help them. So this person did not think this behavior would be useful. For the user unit, one important theme was the importance of and motivation to change, such as to become more physically active. So one part of our app is that it also suggests people to become more physically active, since doing so can make it easier to quit smoking. But a lot of people didn't either think that becoming physically active was important, or they were not motivated to do so. For example, some people said that they were already sufficiently physically active, or they didn't see how becoming more physically active can help quitting smoking. For example, one person said it's a bit condescending, giving up smoking is hard enough without having to do a fitness regime also. So they didn't see that physical activity actually helps the same goal of quitting smoking, but they saw it as 2 separate goals that they had to work on. People who did follow the suggestions of working on becoming more physically active, on the other hand, mentioned the benefits of physical activity for health, for example, and also specifically for quitting smoking. For example, this person thinks that physical activity could really help them to quit smoking forever. Then for the other party level, one important theme was what we called companionableness, a little bit of a difficult word. And this relates both to the virtual coach, but also to other people that might be involved in a behavior, such as this general practitioner, or when we would maybe recommend people to reach out to their social environment for additional support. And here, important things that people mentioned were not feeling alone, having someone to talk to, sharing accomplishments with someone, feeling closer connected, being able to relate to this other party, having someone who's not condescending or patronizing, having not too much pressure from the other person, and feeling supported. So this, as I said, relates both to the virtual coach and to other parties. And lastly, for the environment, we had 4 themes here. One was the helpfulness of support from the social environment. So some people in our study, when they were doing the activities, they included their social environment even when not asked to. This person, for example, wrote down a list and discussed it with their partner, and they found it helpful and motivating. Then, yeah, people are busy with other things. So a lot of people mentioned things such as, oh, I didn't have time to do it. I came home late last night from work, or I was busy. I was too tired. So a lot of things about this. For example, this person said that they are very tired at the end of the day. And then that's why they didn't do the activity that the virtual coach proposed to them. And related to that is that prompts and triggers are helpful. So several people mentioned forgetting to do something. So this person, for example, was asked to watch an educational video, and well, they started and then did something else and forgot to get back to it. So for such a person, a reminder of some sort might be useful. And besides that, there's really a whole range of other environmental factors, including having no access to the internet, not using their phone at home or on certain days, or poor weather that maybe put people in a bad mood, and that's why they didn't do something. So this really shows that it's probably very difficult to account for all possible environmental factors that might prevent people from doing the activities. So in conclusion, we had 14 themes. First, for the behavior level, I mentioned this idea of getting help, advice, tips, and learning. And two other themes here were that people also wanted to get motivation or encouragement, and the timing and intensity. So how often were people asked to do something and at what time of the day? And there we really saw that it really differed. So some people wanted support every day, some people only wanted once per week. So there was really a need for personalization there. For the user unit, I mentioned the motivation to change and the importance of change. Two other themes here were autonomy and personal characteristics. So autonomy includes, for example, when you ask people, hey, maybe you should reach out to your general practitioner for help. Then some people said, hey, that's my own decision. Who are you to recommend this to me? So you have to be very careful how you make suggestions to people in a way that you respect their autonomy. And personal characteristics, I already mentioned for the timing and intensity. And in general, there were just real differences between people with regards to age, education level, household size, etc. So you cannot just generalize across all people. For the other party, I mentioned the companionableness. Two other themes were the accountability and the nature of the other party. So for accountability, people, for example, mentioned that they felt not so accountable to a virtual coach compared to a human. But some people also mentioned that they felt too accountable to a human. So that they have a lot of pressure, for example, from their family or from their friends when they quit smoking, and that they actually enjoy feeling a bit less pressured when it's a virtual coach. And this also relates then to the nature, the human versus AI. So yeah, people frequently referred to the nature of this other party. So whether the virtual coach was now a human or an AI. And people, for example, said that they didn't think that a virtual coach could really understand their situation. They didn't feel like a virtual coach would be able to give proper recommendations and that a human would be needed for that. But other people also appreciated the virtual nature because it's, for example, anonymous. They feel less judged. And I already mentioned they maybe feel less pressure. So they say, okay, well, if I fail, it's okay if it's just a virtual coach. And lastly, for the environment, I already mentioned all four themes. So the helpfulness of support from the social environment, that people are busy with other things, that prompts and triggers are helpful, and that there's really a whole range of environmental factors that makes it very difficult to predict everything that could go wrong in people's lives. Now that we have these themes, the question is, of course, how to address them. So in our paper that we wrote, we formulated a whole range of recommendations based on literature for example, respect people's autonomy. But it's also important to realize that these needs are really interconnected. So for example, when a person says that they are too tired to do something, then, well, first of all, it says something that, they're very tired, of course. but it also says something about the effort. So probably the activity takes quite some effort, because if it was super easy, you wouldn't say that you're too tired to do that. And also that it's maybe not so useful, because if it's something you think is super useful, then maybe you'll do it even when you're tired. So does this now mean that we need to propose activities when people are less tired? Or does it mean that we need to make activities easier? Or does it mean that we need to propose more useful activities? So yeah, it's really difficult to decide how to now, of course, address these needs in our e-health application that we are developing. Yeah, so that was my presentation. This is work I've done with Mark, Christelle, and Willem-Paul. And here's the link to the paper that in which we describe these findings and also these recommendations for addressing people's needs.